Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we get underway, I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which this event is taking place, and acknowledge any First Nations people with us today. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I mean that most sincerely. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Veitch. It is my great pleasure tonight to welcome you to the Wheeler Centre, to welcome a truly wonderful man, a teacher, art lover, author of the acclaimed novels Night Letters, Secrets and Corfu, plus several semi-autobiographical works, endless essays, translations, a lover, a man of letters, whatever the hell that means, inveterate traveller, and to my mind, restless youth.
Thank you.
Joining us to discuss, amongst other things, his new book, here it is, Chameleon, a memoir of art, travel, ideas and love. Please welcome the one and only Mr. Robert Dessaix.
Thank you. Thank you.
The restless youth, I threw that in because, Robert, this is what so much of your writing to me is like. You state openly that you're not a storyteller, which is complete rot, by the way. You're a brilliant storyteller. There are so many wonderful stories in this book. But to my mind, somehow reading it, you are a seeker. You're like you're still that young man looking for something, searching for meaning in every aspect of life. Is that half of the part truth in that, you think?
Partly true. In this book, by the way, the older Robert, this Robert, the one that you're looking at now up on the stage, talks to his younger self, Thomas Robert Jones, and talks to him about what life has taught him, I suppose. But you're right in the sense that I have failed to grow up properly. You've grown up. I can tell, just seeing you walk across the room, that you've grown up. And I haven't managed
That's one of the greatest compliments I've ever been paid. Thank you for that.
Well, I haven't managed to quite grow up. Why have I not managed to quite grow up? It's got something to do, I'm sure, with being an only child and being adopted. Partly that I haven't quite understood in my gut the structure of the family and how a child becomes an adult. And so I've looked on life as a kind of playground. And that's what I do in that book. Well, that's what children do. You're supposed to look on life as a journey. I don't look on life as a journey. I don't think it had a beginning and it has an ending. I look on it as a kind of horizontal space, sometimes as a mosaic, but a horizontal space. And I go out into it and I play. And I refuse to come in for dinner when I'm called. It's just the way I've grown up. It's not a victory, but it's true. I have failed to become the man of the house.
Does this bother you, though? Do you really care?
Do I care? Not now.
Yeah.
But I did, yes. I did care. I felt I had failed. I think I might say in this book, if not, I probably said it in another book. I do repeat myself, but I try to repeat myself in a creative way, like Beethoven, you know, writing variations. I do say somewhere that when my wife left me, the day that she left me, the day that I found myself alone, I opened my mouth and I said aloud, I have failed to be a man. That's how it hit me. I had failed to be a man. I have still failed, but no, I don't care in the same way. When you get to my age, you also will not care about a whole lot of things. You might find them interesting, but you won't care.
Among the descriptions of those I just read out, I wanted to include the word sensualist because your writing is so sensual. It's full of colour and art, not so much music, which we'll get to a little bit later. But it's one of the most abundant qualities in your writing. But I hesitated to use the word because I'd thought the notion of a teetotaling, drug-abstaining, vegetarian sensualist is surely one of the greatest oxymorons that can ever be uttered.
Well, that's me, an oxymoron, really. My life is a balancing act. This book is a balancing act. Creativity is, for me, the act of balancing. And an early name for the book was The Balancing Act. Now, I realised that that was a boring title. Nobody would ever buy a book called Balancing Act. So it's called Chameleon. In me, I think that there is a street Arab. There is. And I use the word advisedly, having been in North Africa quite a few times. But there is also a monk. And so life for me, bit by bit, I've understood this, is a caravanserai. It is where the camels come in to spend the night, where the merchants from across the desert come and stay with their camels. There are many merchants believing many things, wearing many kinds of costumes, with many kinds of faces, many kinds of colours in their clothing. I think that there's a street Arab to touch the essence of one kind of self, but there's also a monk. And they are both at home in the caravanserai. And I walk a tightrope like this, and I do in that book, between the two.
I was going to leave this till a little bit later, but when I say sensual, one who's like myself, who's never been there, can almost sense what you write about North Africa. It's not just your love of the place, but you evoke something of the light of it. And this passage, and I couldn't work out why North Africa. Apart from you talk very honestly about your sort of the sexuality aspect of your first visits to that part of the world, but there was more than that I wanted to know. And this passage that you spoke about, the desert, hit it for me, and I'd just like to read it, if I may. I head for the desert, so to speak, or at least some vision of the desert. I don't want to be alone. I just don't want to be me, the Robert who acts out modernity every second of every day. I want to be somewhere where there are no polarities, at least none of the kind I'm usually shackled by, where silence is like thunder, like the ear-splitting silence after the last note of a symphony has sounded, just before the applause begins, where panic and pleasure melt into the same thing, as they never do in daily life. There, the clutter of my life at home can fall away, the clatter can abate, and I can become drunk on azure and yellow. It's the inebriation of refreshed reflection, not excitement. It's never a matter of right and wrong out there in the desert, as most things are in our now viciously pious society, stiff with its multitude of righteousnesses. It's simply a question of being wiped clean for a while, of innocence, in other words.
Yes, innocence. I think that's what I was looking for. People read what I've written about Morocco, or about Tunisia in particular, and they think, well, as you did, I suppose, he's looking for a sensual experience. So he's not innocent, he's not a monk. And they're thinking in Christian terms. I'm not thinking in Christian terms. I'm thinking in Gideon terms, really, on Gide. I'm thinking, I want the decencies, I want the cultural norms of my life, the one I've grown up with, and do not reject. I want to be free of them now, just for a while, for a month, for 6 weeks. And you get that when you go into the desert. You are wiped clean. Notions of right and wrong go. I was a little boy, the little boy that I'm writing to, Thomas Robert Jones, who was very right. Right was very important to me. It was important to be right. And I notice when I read certain newspapers now that it's very important to the journalists to be right. Or when I watch SBS or certain parts of the ABC, rightness is important. It's not so important to me anymore. I don't want to be right. I don't feel pressed to be right. I want to be happy.
Your peregrinations, if I can call them that, Robert, reading the book, didn't seem to come out of a place of what we're talking about just now. They weren't an act of rebellion, weren't they?
No.
You weren't pushing back.
No.
You didn't come from an essentially unhappy childhood.
No, happy.
Yeah.
I'm the result of a happy childhood.
Yeah.
That's what happens if you have one. You end up like me.
there is a lovely aspect that you talk about, and it made me laugh so much. Perhaps this was an act of rebellion, if you like, when at 10 years old, you decided to shock your parents by taking yourself to Sunday school, but not a conventional Sunday school. It was a Christian Science Sunday school. Why, and what is it about that philosophy were you attracted to?
You're the first person that's asked me this. I've done interview after interview after interview after interview. Nobody has asked me.
Well, here we are.
It's a Melbourne question, I think.
Maybe.
My mother was doing the laundry. I was 9, and I went into her and I said, I don't believe in God, and I don't believe that Jesus was God, and I don't believe any of it, and I don't believe in priests, and I don't believe in having authorities. And she said, well, you should try the Christian Scientists, because they don't believe that Jesus was God, and they don't have priests, and you might like it. She herself had a medical background. She was a paediatric nurse from Western Australia. She said,
Rita. This is Rita?
No, that's Peter's mother.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Her mother's name was
what was her name, sorry?
Jean.
Jean, yeah, okay.
Jean McLeish-Jones. Presbyterian, but you know, not really. And she said, Mrs. Fogg up the street will take you. Fogg with 2 G's, obviously. And Mrs. Fogg did take me, and I really liked it. And I do not reject having liked it. It became for me, and I'm not ashamed to say this, it became for me the still point in my life around which my mind circled and circled and circled. And I suppose over time, the circles grew wider. That's all. I realize now, looking back, now that I know a little bit more about Hinduism rather than Buddhism, Hinduism, I know that it was, indeed, a Western form of a particular kind of Hindu philosophy. The philosophy that believes there is only one reality, not 2. Whereas Christianity believes there are 2 realities, this one and that one. Desert religions tend to believe that. I see no point in living like that. And I feel the way many Hindus do, although Christian Scientists do not feel like this because of their Christianity, that sex is not a sin. What a Hindu would say to you of any stripe is that you cannot break the cycle of birth and rebirth if you are a sensualist. You cannot break the cycle, but you do it at your own pace. But it's not a sin. Hindus don't use the word sin, which so many Christians, like Christian Scientists, do not use the word sin. And so it suited me. It suited me very well.
Is it with so many, religion is a part of the book, of much of your writing, Robert, but the way you talk about religion is a bit of a theme for me, because some of you, there's a part of you that's very aloof in what you write about. There's almost a sense of you're just a sort of not just, that's the wrong term, but you're the permanent observer. You don't kind of get sort of sucked into any one thing in particular. And this is not a criticism. There is something. It's the aloof. I mean, the descriptions of the Arabic world and the Soviet Union, in which you spent a lot of time, and this might be more of a sign of the times in which we live now, but we're not moved by what we now call the injustices. I mean, the way women are treated in strictly Islamic countries, or for that matter, the kind of permanent cruelties of the Soviet Union in which you lived in very, very strict times. Did that not have an effect on you personally?
Yes, it did, but it was not my project to do anything about it. I'm not trying to defend myself. I'm just explaining the way I thought. I was very aware of the place of women in Morocco and in Tunisia. I didn't know Egypt at that time. I was very aware of the concentration camps in the Soviet Union. I mean, I was, after all, a friend of Prokofiev's wife, who'd been in a concentration camp for 9 years. She introduced me to other women who'd been in concentration camps in the Soviet Union. I was very aware.
In the gulags, you mean?
Yes. The concentration camps.
Yeah.
But I did not feel, I'm not defending myself, I'm just explaining. I did not feel that it was my project to do anything about that. The project of someone like me is to get people to change their consciousness. And that's the level I worked at. Not everyone can do that, or nothing would ever change, of course. But there is nothing of the rebel in me. I don't try to change the world. I want it to change itself. I know that's not adequate. I know that. I used to wake up in the morning in Moscow and I could hear the women chipping at the ice on the streets in winter, outside my window, down on the street. Every morning I would think of what was happening in Kamchatka, what was happening in the Far East, in Russia, at that very instant. I am aware, but I don't see it as my job, I never did, to do something in the world to change that.
Many people would find difficulty in drawing the parallels between the aesthetics to which you're attracted, on one hand, that of the Middle East, and of Russia. Can you explain that? It seems to be a bit of a conundrum.
No, I can't really. It's funny. I mean, again, you're the first person who said this. I can't really.
Is that another Melbourne question, perhaps? Or?
No, I think it's just you. I think that I'm attracted to opposites in some sense.
That makes sense, yeah.
And that I live out this and then I live out that. I'm not very interested in theories. I mean, I always found Marxism, when I was at the university in Moscow, where it was a compulsory subject in some form, boring. I'm interested in living. I want to know how people live if they believe this or believe that. When people say to me, I'm a Roman Catholic or I'm a Muslim, well, what do you believe is true? Is what I want to know. I don't care what name you give. What do you believe is true? And how does that affect the way you get up in the morning? The way you think about your children, the way you think about beauty, the way you think about love, the way you think about sex, the way you think about war. I'm interested in experience, really, and in individuals. I'm not really interested in peoples. It's just the way my mind works. I'm not saying it's the right way to think. It's how I grew up thinking. And I think that, for me, the Mediterranean world, it's not just North Africa, it's Italy, it's Spain, it's Greece, it's Lebanon, it's Syria. The Mediterranean world is a world which allowed me to be a particular kind of man. And this book is about the many kinds of man you can be. Yes. Not just the men you saw in the movies in the 1950s in Australia. And that's what that world did for me. That's not what interested me about Russia. What interested me about Russia was the literature of the 19th century. It was Turgenev, it was Pushkin, it was Tolstoy, less perhaps Dostoevsky, because of his particular religious beliefs, which I just can't draw close to, I'm afraid. The Virgin Mary does nothing for me. The Mother of God, as she's called over there.
Robert, I can't imagine you're the sort of person that would ever try to proselytise anyone on anything or change people's...
Once.
Yeah, sorry?
I would have once, yes.
Oh, really?
But,
okay.
I would have hoped that someone would see that I was right. So I would have not used the word you used.
Is that dogmatic or just passionate, though?
Oh, I think I came across as dogmatic.
Okay.
I think that I come across quite often as having very fixed ideas. But from my point of view, what I do is I take a stand and I wait to be knocked off my pedestal. And I think a lot of only children do that.
It's as if you hope to be knocked off your pedestal.
Well, I want to learn how the world works and how people cope. All my books are about how people cope. It fascinates me when you look at whether it's The Guardian or it's some other less hectic newspaper, or whether it's SBS or the ABC, whatever it is, you realise how much suffering there is in the world, how hideous the world is. I want to know how people cope. How do people cope with the fact that they will be dead shortly? Yes. I mean, my financial advisor said to me about 3 weeks ago, statistically, you will be dead within 10 years. That's the word she used. How do I cope with that? I have to go home and cope with that. Everyone has to cope with that. Everyone here today has to cope with that.
Yes, you do talk about death and the end very movingly in the book, but I didn't come away feeling maudlin or
good,
depressed or anything like that. I
Oh.
love the passage that I thought of this. At one stage, you were feeling. Was it after the marriage where you saw a psychiatrist in Bondi? Oh no, it was with Don, the fellow you were very fond of and who broke your heart, basically.
You are so sweet to say very fond. Yes, I had a crush on. Yes.
Okay. To the extent that you were, you went to a psychiatrist.
Yes.
You tell the story,
Well, I went
please.
4 times, and he charged me $250 a time and said, the key word for you is abandonment. You are afraid of abandonment. I never went back. That was the key. I had to simply look at abandonment. I felt, as many adopted children do, abandoned by my birth mother for no rational reason. It's just an inside reason. And then abandoned by my wife, and then abandoned by Don, of course. Abandoned. And if you're an only child and have no family, you really are very alone in the world. You don't have brothers and sisters or aunties and uncles or parents or children or anyone to hold you up. And that was the word. And so I looked abandonment straight in the eye and got on with living.
Before we move on, I actually want to read one more passage. It was about the Russia that you knew. Again, so evocative. In Moscow, because you were in Moscow in the real deep freeze of the Brezhnev years.
Yes, Brezhnev,
What I remember most strongly about it is the smell. It's the smell of the ice chest on our back veranda in Lane Cove, the smell that fills your nostrils in winter in Moscow vestibules, and just inside front doors as you take your boots off, the smell of thawing, a fuggy,
deliquescent.
Thank you. Smell, damp and muddy, God bless you. Now and again it hits my nostrils still if I'm somewhere frozen, high up in Ladakh, say, wherever that is. Where's that?
North of India.
Okay, in say, in a snug tea house looking out on glaciers, or stepping in off the street somewhere in Paris, a hotel foyer, a museum, a cafe in February or March. And when it does, I think of Moscow half a lifetime ago in the mid-60s, mushy Moscow in the thaw. I see the Lenin Library again on a winter's morning as I queued in the nose-pinching warmth just inside the massive swinging doors to cloak my overcoat. Very... who wrote the short story, Overcoat?
Gogol.
Okay, I remember
Gogol.
that. There's my overcoat, scarf and hat. Slush comes to mind, and being young and being hungry too. Always hungry in Moscow in winter. Something gnawed at me day in, day out. I used to lust all morning after dumplings, small and pinched and salty, dripping with sour cream. Real Siberian, nothing Ukrainian or Polish.
Yes.
That's a great passage. That's a great
Well, please, do you think so? I mean, what can I do? I can't tell anyone anything about Russia that they can't read in an historian's book about Russia. In an Orlando Figes book, for example, to take one writer who's still writing about Russia. I can't. I don't have that sort of mind. I'm not a scholar. I'm a dilettante. I float around. An impression from there, an impression from there. That's what I am. But I can find English words, I think, to evoke in my readers' minds a smell picture, a colour picture, a sound picture of a place. So that's all I can offer.
Do you have a sense of the Russian sensibility? And I ask that because these are difficult times to be a Russophile. They are on the nose for obvious reasons around the world. Do you understand that? Do you, what can
Well,
I
I
say?
think so. I'm not a Russophile.
No?
I
Okay.
love the 19th century.
Okay.
I am a 19th century man. I was born in 1944, but I'm a 19th century man. I love Turgenev. I love the civilized man, or as he would have said, civilisé, l'homme civilisé. He said in French because French is the most civilized language. Not the best language. English and Russian are much richer and more exciting, but it is the most civilized language. And so he said, civilisé. I want to be happy with that culture, the culture of the 19th century, but also civilized. And once you reach the revolutionary era and then the Soviet era, I no longer belong. I can't help it. There are all sorts of things wrong with the 19th century, but something about its culture, the musical culture and the literary culture, and the sense of fineness, I suppose, which means something to me deep inside, particularly coming from Lane Cove, I have to say.
Did you find that 19th century Russia alive in the Soviet Union of the 1960s that you...
Nothing had changed.
Right.
I mean, it was Chekhov from top to bottom. The mentality was Chekhovian. The mentality was Gogolian. We spoke, of course, about the Soviet man, but this was all a construct, from my point of view, to paper over the Mongol. If I'm allowed to say that. You never know what you're allowed to say these days. The Mongol. And I think that what culture always does is paper over something more primal. I do it. Everybody does it. And for me, what was more primal lives in Morocco. For Russians, it is the Mongol.
Okay. In the book, it's very much your voice, Robert, but not entirely. And I love the inclusion of the voice of Niall. Now, explain who Niall actually is and his role of this almost a kind of an amorphous voice, almost something like a Greek chorus, sometimes a slightly, if I have to say, a slightly pompous Greek chorus.
Did you say pompous?
A little bit.
Oh, really?
Just a little bit, but in a nice way. And some are sort of, well, perhaps he was pricking your pomposity, Robert, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, he's supposed to, because on writing the book, I felt, I wouldn't use the word pompous, I'm a prissy person.
I'll accept prissy, okay.
I think so. There's nothing I can do about it now. There is a prissy side to me. And I thought, I need a self who is not so prissy. And I thought he should go to a Melbourne school.
Yes.
Which I never name, for legal reasons. I read a book about the school. I spoke to a friend who went to that school. And I called him Piers.
Right.
And I thought, Piers is a pompous name.
Yes, there you go.
And then what happened is I went to Ireland 2 years ago by mistake.
As one does.
As one does. Well, Heathrow is so confusing these days. And I ended up in Ireland. Too many people, too many flights. And I stayed in Ireland for 6 days. I'd never been to Ireland. I'd always thought Ireland would be priest-ridden, you see. And I'm afraid of priest-ridden places. So I went to Ireland. It's not priest-ridden at all. It's hard to find a priest anywhere in Ireland these days.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I thought, no, I will make Piers Irish. I'll give him an Irish name, Niall. I was reading a novel by Niall Williams, I think his name is, Irish writer. And he's supposed to be a self who, I think you say interrogates, if you go to the University of Technology, Sydney, interrogates my prissier self and brings me down a peg. And that's his function. That's Niall's function. So he's real, but not in any sense that the board of Melbourne Grammar could sue me for, if you know what I mean.
That's where I went to school.
Oh, you polished up very nicely.
Thank you. I think you even go further than that. You construct Niall in such, like I can see Niall, he's sort of a big, like almost a bit of a bear of a man with a beard and a strong sort of person. Is that how
I never have, and this is very odd because I think most people do, I never have a strong sense of the physical presence of my characters, including myself. And there is usually no physical description of the characters. It's the mind that interests me. And it's not something I'm edit out. My mind doesn't go there to the body. It just doesn't go there. In Morocco, it does go to bodies.
we were talking about this before, but I think you're someone that's, well, to me in the book, Chameleon is a wonderful name. I think Harlequin, which is a word that is redolent throughout the book as well, that could have also been the title, perhaps. But you seem to eschew labels. You don't like to be an I am sort of a person. And there's one small passage that, in terms of how human beings look at their sexuality, and for guidance of this you refer to the Indian way of looking at things, and I found it a fascinating passage to whom you mention sexual orientation is a behaviour, not an identity. Now that obviously struck a great chord of how to view this with yourself. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Well, you've said a whole lot of things. I think that you're correct. I was on a panel in Bangalore a few years ago, a gay panel. I mean, you've got to have panels on something, I suppose. And this one was on being gay, and it was in India, in Bangalore. And it was all Indians, and they were all gays and lesbians, and me. And they all turned on me during this panel and said, your problem in the West is that you think homosexuality is an identity. In India, we understand that it's not. It's a way you behave. The important thing, of course, in India is to get married and have children. Well, I got married, but I didn't have children. I had dogs, actually. I prefer dogs to children. On the whole, I prefer dogs to children. But I did get married. My homosexuality is a behaviour, I think, not an identity. I don't know what identity means, and the whole book speaks against identity. It's in favour of experiencing many things in the mosaic that is life. And
that wonderful quote, the vast mosaic of human sexuality, there are many shards, which you...
Many shards, there are many masculinities. And I'm surprised that Australians have not been more open to the notion of there being many masculinities. And I talk about masculinity in Indonesia, which I have some experience of, where I think there is a more sensitive attitude to masculinity than in Australia. But then I'm a child of the 1940s and 1950s, and so I went to the movies with we called them pictures, of course, in those days, at the Rio in Lane Cove every Friday night, perhaps it was Saturday, and we watched American movies about being a man. I mean, Robert Mitchum and so forth. My notion of a man was always somebody who won something. You always dominated other men, and you dominated one woman in particular.
And who always wins.
You win. Yes. You're always embattled if you're a man. Well, I'm not embattled against anything, really. I'm interested. Put on a show, I'll watch it. Well, in those years, that was the notion of masculinity I was brought up with, and I realised I could never play this game. I would never win that game. And when I knew I was going to get married, because everyone got married, I wondered actually how I would go, because I don't want to win. I don't want to own anyone. There's a little story I think I tell in there, but perhaps I tell it in another book, one of my other variations, a la Beethoven. When I was in Corfu, researching Corfu, the book, I met the village policeman where my hero lived, 𝐾𝐨𝐿, the Australian man who lived in Corfu, about whom I write in that book. And I said to him, well, what did you think of 𝐾𝐨𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐢𝐻𝐫𝐻𝐫𝐻𝐿. You're the policeman, you must have known him. Yes, 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 I knew him. Yes, yes, we all knew him. Yes, he's a very nice man. I said, so his homosexuality didn't bother you? He said, oh, no, 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 no. Homosexuality doesn't bother us at all. What bothered us was that he didn't have power over any woman.
Oh. Okay.
Well, boom, it hits you straight away that that's the way I think the world, by and large, still thinks. That to be a man involves having power over a woman. I felt and still feel awkward about the phrase, my wife. I know it's acceptable. I know people say my wife and mean nothing. I don't like the my with wife.
All that is breaking down, though, isn't it? Surely,
yes.
Robert. I mean, and
yes.
also the Indian attitude to sexuality. Surely that's what's happening now. You know,
yes.
with gender fluidity and all that's happening in the world. I mean,
yes, I mean I don't mean that
Centre is very au fait with all that.
Yes, but I don't mean that everyone should feel that they're partly Rita Hayworth or anything like that.
Yeah,
which seems to be where some of the ideology is going. I don't mean that really. I just mean that it's something that you enact. You may be totally heterosexual, you may be totally focused on having a woman. I have no objection to that if that's the narrative that's playing out inside you. I'm just saying that there are many narratives, not one, not 1,700, but millions of narratives. And this is a good thing. And one should feel free to choose.
A little vignette, then you do. I think you've spoken to it in your previous or previous works, Robert. But just you were adopted, as we know that, and you didn't meet your birth mother until how old were you?
I think I was 45.
I'd just like to read that. When I did meet her in my 40s, my birth mother, Yvonne, made it plain she was disappointed in me, that I'd failed at something. But what? She blamed herself. She said that if she'd only kept me, I'd have turned out like a regular man, with a proper man's job and with children. I don't think it occurred to her for a second that sort of thing could be hurtful.
And she said, where? I would have had a job in Westpac, she said.
I beg your pardon?
I would have had a job in Westpac if she'd kept me.
Oh, what you missed out of.
Yeah, I think actually it's worked out better than that.
But was that, I mean, are we being a bit glib with the emotion of something like that?
A bit. But you see, I want to emphasize that I have not suffered. I am not a person who has suffered. My life has not been tragic. Awful things have happened, of course.
Yeah.
I'm 81 years old. Awful things will have happened. But I have not suffered. I've had a good life. I'm not complaining about anything. So that I'm not complaining that my mother saw the world like that. My mother was born in 1922. The world looked different to her. And she felt that I had the misfortune not to be loved properly by my adoptive parents, but I had been. I'd been hugely loved. I would use a different word. I would say treasured. I've had a wonderful life. I have nothing to complain about at all.
So one of the first times you speak a little bit about your father, who we don't hear about very much, Tom. He sounds like a genuinely lovely man with his Hawaiian shirt.
He looked a bit like you, did you know? He did.
I've got a couple of Hawaiian shirts as well.
Yes, but I don't think I loved him openly enough. But I think, I mean, there are more parents in the audience here, of course, than I could imagine, and you will know better. But it seems to me that children often don't show their feelings for their parents, don't show their appreciation for how specially they've been held in their parents' affection. I think that's common. I think I'm not the only person who's done that.
My kids certainly bloody don't show the appreciation for me that I warrant, but what can I do about that?
And I didn't, I think, for Tom, but I think he was special. He was born in the 1880s, my father.
Spoke French. He was a French
He learned French to make me speak French, and it worked. He learnt French to make me speak French. Tom Jones, he learnt French. I mean, he was an amazing man. He didn't read books. The only books he read were Teach Yourself French and French phrase books and French verb endings, those sorts of books. He was totally focused on making me learn French, and I did learn French.
Did you have to, come out to your parents and at a time when it was traumatically difficult for many men to do that?
I never did. They died before I started to live with a man. Well, everyone was dead by the time I started to live with a man. I never had to come out to anybody, really. Did I have to? I don't think so. And besides, I didn't sort of come out of a closet. I was on the ABC, a bit like David Marr. It was perfectly obvious to everybody, I suppose, that I was homosexual. I didn't have to say anything. That wasn't my job. My job was to talk about writers, but I'm sure people knew. But I didn't hide anything. So one woman in all those years wrote to me and called upon the Virgin Mary to curse me.
Oh.
She lived in Launceston.
Well, say no more.
But only one.
Could have been Bernie.
It could have been Bernie, yes. No, I feel I have swum against the current, if I can say so. I don't play football, I don't play cricket, I'm not interested in cars, I don't own a woman, I don't drink, I don't smoke. What else don't I do? I don't know. But I do swim against the current.
We were talking about this just before, Robert. Not only don't you drink and smoke, you have never drinked or smoked.
I have never drinked or smoked. That's right. Never drunk or smoked.
You were never curious? Everyone was smoking when you were growing up.
I told you there's a monk in me. If you'll pardon the expression.
A very empty mug by the sounds of it, if you don't have been drinking.
No, monk.
Yes, I know. Were you not? Okay. Was it a control thing? Because you do... was it a feeling, if I do this, I will not be in control of my surroundings,
Well, a psychiatrist might say that. I would say simply that I have no interest in that particular scaffolding. I have no interest. I'm here for a very short time. I want to be totally here, as do many people who think like me. We want to be here, absolutely here. I don't want to be partly here. I won't be here at all very shortly. That's what I think. And I have, I think, great joy in life. I don't need chemicals to give me joy. I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all.
You're going to hear for a while because you're on a plane tomorrow, are you not?
I'm going to India tomorrow, yes, that's right.
But you're going to India tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen.
But you were going to just mention music, because you said music's not in the book. Music's very important at the end of the book.
Prokofiev.
Prokofiev is important, but music in general, because I felt, because music has no words, that it could not interest me. And when I first met Peter Timms 43 years ago, he was disappointed that I had no feelings about music. I mean, I liked Beethoven. Who doesn't like Beethoven? Everybody likes Beethoven. But I had no special feeling about music. I was a bit afraid of music. Had no words. And therefore, as I said to him, no ideas. For ideas, you need words. And he disappointed me in having very little interest in language. He still has very little interest in language, but I have come around to music, and it's partly COVID, I think, partly having to watch YouTube every night. And we just go every night. Look, 6 nights a week. We go to Buenos Aires, we go to Frankfurt, we go to the Wigmore Hall in London, we go to Moscow, we go to Leningrad, to St. Petersburg, I should say. We don't, interestingly, go to Japan and China and India unless it's to watch Chinese or Koreans or Japanese playing Beethoven and Prokofiev and Shostakovich. We don't go to hear them playing their own classical music. Westerners don't, by and large. Westerners, by and large, love their own classical tradition and not other people's. They might go and listen to a bit of sitar one night, you know, it's so atmospheric, but they don't really love it the way they do their own classical culture. Every night, thanks to COVID, we would sit at home and do that. And I'd have tried to explain in the last 2 chapters why this has revolutionized my life. I was wrong. I was wrong about many things, but particularly I was wrong about music. Music is a particular kind of bliss. It's a particular kind of beauty. It's a dimension that I had not experienced.
Is it a language? A lot of people say music is a language.
Well, you could say that. It sounds a bit intellectual to me to say that, but for me, it's not a matter of intellect so much. It's just that if you play Prokofiev, if you play one of his war sonatas, for example, I am transported, what other word is there, into another level of being. The beauty is indescribable in words. Words are useless. And yes, it was not like that. I mean, I used to see his wife, his first wife, every week when I lived in Moscow.
Yeah.
But I would only go to a Prokofiev concert if somebody invited me. It was not of interest to me.
Visual art we haven't spoken of, and in the last part of the book you talk so beautifully about visual art and what moves in visual art, and the works like Klimt and Pierre Bonnard and so forth. And it struck me that a lot of your writing is very much like that kind of post-impressionistic, like sort of spots of light and different colour and all sorts of things.
Good.
Yeah, look, we are out of time. Just quickly, what's the trip tomorrow? What are you off to do in India? Tell us where you're going and why.
Be happy. I'm going to the area where the Ganges comes down out of the mountains and hits the plain. I'm interested in hill stations and in the kind of mentality that inhabited hill stations. This hill station is called Mussoorie, north of Dehradun. Then I'm going down to Rajasthan. That's all I'm doing, to a camel market town. And I'm going to sit in the camel market town in certain comfort, of course, you know, why not, and enjoy that kind of more Islamic society. I'll go to Calcutta and do a literary event in Calcutta. I love Calcutta. It's filthy, it's squalid, it's crazy. You can't move because of the traffic jams. But for a week, I love it. It brings me to life. It vivifies me in a way that, well, 𝐭𝐡𝐻 yesterday did not, I suppose.
Have a wonderful journey, Robert. Thank you for the journey you've given us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Dessaix.
Thank you very much.
We're going to questions in a moment, but Robert, you're happy to sign some books at the...
Yes,
okay, this is the book, Chameleon. Here it is. It's a beautiful read, a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful read. And you're a beautiful man, Robert. It's been lovely talking to you. But now it's over to you, ladies and gentlemen, because you might have some questions that you'd like to ask Robert. I'm not sure how the Wheeler Centre likes to do this. Is it a microphone? Yes, there's a young lady there. I can't see, my eyes are terrible with a microphone. Does anybody have any questions or topics of conversation or observations you'd like to make in Robert Dessaix's direction? Yes, madam, you can probably... there's a lady here in the front row.
Good evening. I've been present at one of your launching 20-something years ago when you were very young and I was studying desktop publishing in Australia. I'm Polish originally and I live in Australia for 34 years. And listening what you've said a lot was about Russia. At some point when you read a piece of the writing, it was something about Polish or Poland. And also that's one part. Have you been in Poland and your impression of Poland? And the other thing, you said a lot about music, mentioning Russian composers, right, or pianists. You've never mentioned Chopin. Did you like him, or you love Chopin's
there you go.
music?
I like Chopin, but he's not allowed in the house, I'm afraid. Nor is Tchaikovsky, simply not allowed. Poland is, for me, a Western country, really. And so it's only interesting as another Western country. I mean, it's a country where people spoke French, of course. They speak English now, as well as French. but the orientation, the mentality is basically Western. And every contact
Russians
I've
Eastern,
had-
isn't it?
Pardon?
Russians are Easterners.
Russians are Easterners, and they look down on Poland, of course. And the Russian word Polyak for a Pole is, I think, a negative word, really. I don't feel like that at all about Poland. I went there and...
He
Do I
speaks
speak
Russian very fluently.
Yes, I speak Russian. I taught Russian. I've spoken Russian for 70 years, I suppose. So yes, I do. Yes, I speak Russian. I love it. And I did learn Polish, but Polish...
It was compulsory in Poland when I grew up, through primary school and high school.
Yes. Well, that's not a good basis. You can't force people to love anything. But I always enjoyed myself in Poland. But it's a Western country.
Anyone else, please?
There will be somebody.
There'll be someone.
Somebody. There's a hand.
Hi, Robert. Thank you for this discussion. I'm quite enjoying it. Just want to know what your thoughts are on love and indifference, if you could.
Love and
Indifference.
indifference. Ooh.
It's a very big question.
You speak to unrequited love in the book quite
Well, I
sensibly.
just think that the English word love covers too much ground. It means too many things, and I understand that in some other languages it's broken up into different kinds of love. But love must cover in English my love of rhubarb, my love of my dog, my love of my partner, my love of his mother, my love of, well, even Tchaikovsky. It means too much. It means that you lose all sense of yourself in a joyful union with someone or something. Rhubarb, the dog. That's what it means. Indifference, since you asked the question, I'll give a short answer on indifference. As I've grown older, I have become indifferent to certain things, and I'm not justifying myself, that I know will never now play a part in my life or over which I have no influence at all. I simply become indifferent. I'm at the end now, and there is no point. And so I look for pleasure and significance and strength to smaller things and become indifferent about larger things. Politics, for example, which seems to me just to go round and round and round, saying the same things over and over again. And I am honing in on smaller things now. It's interesting that Michael mentioned Bonnard, the painter Bonnard, who many of you will have seen because you had an exhibition, I think, here in Melbourne. And of course I think of the painting where you have the cat at the table and the wife outside in the garden that you see through the window. Nothing really. I mean, a tedious picture, but it transports you because his virtuosity has turned this scene of suburban ordinariness into something blissful and unutterably beautiful. And that's what I try to do with the ordinariness that I encounter. And I feel indifferent to the larger things, as Bonnard was going on around me. It's not a justification, it's just as I've grown older and older and older, the way I feel.
I wanted to mention love, the passage towards the end of the book, where you talk about the death of your dog. And you include in full, and I'm so glad you did, Robert, a piece you obviously wrote for The Guardian, When Your Dog Left. Oh boy, it's a heartbreak read and so beautiful. And my wife, who's sitting in the audience, who has turned me into a dog lover, she would say a dog slave. Anyone who has ever loved a dog, read this passage. It is so beautiful and so heartbreaking, and I know exactly where you're coming from. A couple more questions. We have 5 minutes left, and then we're saying farewell. Anybody else would like to ask something? Observe.
Go on.
Oh yes, madam, in the third row. There is a microphone coming. If you'd like to use it, thank you.
Oh, thanks. This is not so much a question as just a comment. When I hear you say that you feel that you are at the end, and I know what you mean, but what I am so grateful for is that you are writing and giving us a perspective on the world and being alive that we could not get from someone who was 28 or 35 or even 50. I think we need voices like yours, which are now giving us, you are coming into a new world. You are opening the doors for us in a way so that we can look at it differently. And it's a new voice, and it's a fresh voice. And I am very grateful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. What a beautiful, madam, that is so lovely. I think that's unless anybody else has another question or comment, I think that's a beautiful place to end it. Thank you so much. Please thank Mr. Robert Dessaix, my guest tonight here at the Willa Centre. This is his book.
Thank you.
It's over there. If you'd like to buy a copy, and meet Robert,
I
we'll
will
be
come
there.
and
Thank you
sign
so
if
much
you
for
want
coming.
a signed copy. Yes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.